Hello, welcome back. It is week 177 on Out on That Line podcast. I'm Jeff with my co-host Alex. As always, Alex, how you doing this week?
Jeff, I am looking forward to a flawless victory, but I'm going to put it back on you first. If you're feeling hungry like I am, what would you rather have? Would you rather have Chinese dinner, Korean lunch, or Japanese breakfast? Go.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with a succulent Chinese meal.
Eating a meal.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if I had to pick between the three, I think my choice would be the Japanese breakfast.
Oh, that's so convenient, Jeff. Tell them what they've won.
I think the folks have won a whole podcast about exactly that, is Japanese breakfast. And the new album for Melancholy Brunettes, in parentheses, and Sad Women. Great title to an album. I feel like you could not be screaming that you were an indie artist more clearly than you do with a title like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I read the story behind it where Michelle was talking about like, oh, I was reading a collection of short stories called like a bag of apples or a mind of apples or something like that. And it was a line from one of the stories. And I'm like, of course you would pick a book of short stories. If you asked me, I'd be like, yeah, I was scrolling around on Instagram and I saw a funny meme about a cat dressed like a wizard. And I said to myself, I make an album called Cat Dressed Like a Wizard. Like that's the best that I could do. But yeah, it's a hipsterific, indie-rific name for an album. We'll certainly get into. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
So I think it's funny that it's a short story book, and who knows how popular it is, but it's very funny that it's such an indie artist thing to find some very obscure, like past, like historical reference or something to make a song about it, to have as your inspiration, but then to try to make that song sound as mass appealing as possible. It's just funny how that's always the pipeline, is like take something obscure and try to make it as like sound as glossy and as popular as you can. I do remember we did the previous, I don't know if it was the previous album, the last one that she did.
Yes.
Has she released anything since that we did on the show?
No, 2021 was Jubilee, and that's when we covered that one.
Okay. I do remember liking that album.
Oh yeah.
I think with artists like Japanese Breakfast, I think I can't help but draw comparisons to an artist like, Fiona Apple or Mitski, very much like that independent female singer-songwriter, kind of carrying the torch from like Ani DeFranco and people like that from back in the day. And even like a Melissa Etheridge, it's like there's been this long history and line of solo female artists, really focusing on kind of a female experience, letting the anger really come through on a lot of things. I think Japanese Breakfast does a great job, I think, of packaging it into a really pop-centric kind of thing. I think when you listen to Mitski, there's some really good pop songs there, but there's a lot of it where it's just, this is just spilling out of her and this is how it's going to come out. There's some of it that you wouldn't, there's not like a designated chorus, or like you wouldn't really say has a general pop structure to it. I think you'll find, like what I find is Japanese Breakfast strays outside of those lines a lot less than some other indie artists do, but I think it's because she is among the best at being in this lane of this glitzy, glossy, like kind of indie pop. Reminds me a lot of, in some ways, like Always, bands like that. I think there's a lot of that really upbeat, playful, kind of melodies that they do with that, especially right off the bat. The melody with, and I'm gonna have to reference Here Is Someone. When you listen to that, it sounds like a Fleetwood Mac kind of melody. I think she's very, very good at that. I think it's very appealing. It's very hooky, a lot of her songs. And when it's a really short album where some of the things kind of sound very similar as you go through it, it doesn't affect that as much because it's short. Like I remember putting this on the first time and then it was over. It's like 32 minutes long. It's like almost nothing. It's a little taste. It's just a really nice like package of songs. Like I really enjoyed from top to bottom. There was no spot where I thought this got a little boring. I thought it was a nice feature that we had Jeff Bridges on there. Like that just felt very random to have him on this album. But as the only feature too, like if you're only gonna have one person on there, it's like someone that plays music, sure, but is not really associated as a musician. It's just a very interesting album overall. I enjoyed it though.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
we'll get back to the Jeff Bridges of it all and Men in Bars, because I had the same reaction where it's like, ah, fuck it, we'll just get into it now. It's like, well, why
Mhm.
wouldn't you pick some kind of like the obvious answer would probably be like ask someone on the street and they'd be like Willie Nelson.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? There's any number of like country elder statesmen or like young guys you could have picked.
Mhm.
Um, and it would have been totally fine. But I think what to me is so perfect about getting Jeff Bridges to do it is it's like the song is perfectly acted because
Mhm.
it's a pretty basic song lyrically, structurally. And it's the delivery that makes it excellent. It's the way that things are phrased and sort of like trying to stretch out fewer syllables than you have. You have too much space and not enough syllable to fill it. So you
Mhm.
kind of stretch some things, or you have that same amount of space and you're trying to cram too many syllables in. So you got to get creative with how you structure it. It takes on a very like conversational tone and is very well acted, especially by Jeff Bridges. I think Michelle Zollner sings it beautifully, and it's sweet and it's steady and it's musical. And then Jeff Bridges comes in and he has a really nice voice and
Mhm.
he's a good musician, but it really is kind of like his acting power that he brings to it. And this story of this like mutually toxic couple with like very simple lyrics that are just so wonderful. Like this idea of even this thing that we have, even when it breaks, it's ours. We made
Mhm.
it. And that is such a like simple but fun, interesting idea for this like kind of bluesy, cosmic, honky tonk country song in the middle of this indie folk, indie pop kind of like short, sweet meditation to
Mhm.
throw out that trick. Like you said, the only feature to just give us that randomly, it's I think it typifies for me what Japanese Breakfast does well and what this album does well, which is just when you think you have it figured out and things are kind of cooking, and at a certain point you're maybe thinking this is all kind of riding one level and one dynamic, there's a little curveball in there for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I remember seeing Jeff Bridges um on what do you sorry on Kelly Clarkson's show, and also he did the Crazy Heart movie. So he's associated with music as far as actors go. He's associated with it. And I think it's funny. It was like it almost felt like it didn't fit the first time I listened to it, because I was like, man, this is like a really nice kind of love song, but it's she's clearly far, far younger than him. He's not really a singer or a musician. And then it's exactly like you said, I realized it was not about having some knockout singer on there and let's do the best duet we can. It was more about get somebody that can play the part that needs to be played in the song. And if you watch a movie like Crazy Heart, and I absolutely recommend everybody go watch that movie because it's fantastic, you see that Jeff Bridges is probably the perfect person to sing this part of the song, because I think it's supposed to feel very lived in. I think that's, she can do the really kind of modern, upbeat, indie pop, that really anthemic kind of thing. And then, but she is a songwriter. That's the thing. I think that's what a song like Men in Bars shows, is that she's not just an artist and just this kind of makes these songs because they're going to sound a certain way and it's like supposed to mean all this certain stuff. It's she is a songwriter. And I think that's something that if you have that, it doesn't matter what genre you're in, you're always going to have something to draw from. Like if you're truly an artist and truly a songwriter, that's why you see somebody like Jason Isbell consistently make albums that are fantastic, is because they're always, the way they look at the world is just different from everybody else. Like who would have thought, if you are in the indie pop space, that somebody like Jeff Bridges would be perfect to have on a song with you? Like it's so perfectly indie, but who would think of that? That's the thing. I think that's why she is looked at, I think, on a little bit different level than a lot of these other indie bands. Like I think she's put on a pedestal as like she's kind of, when she does something, that's the way things are going to start moving. And I think she's looked at as somewhat of a leader in this space, and I think she's looked at as somebody that, she gets a pass a lot. There's some artists where they come out with something, you're like, this is terrible. Like who's buying this? Like who is giving them this money to keep doing this? She's one of those artists that's done plenty of good work, that she's bought all the license to do something weird and crazy, like a song with Jeff Bridges, and have it be absolutely perfect. And like, as I listened to the album a couple more times after the first time, that became my favorite song on the album.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's just weird how it happened, but it was just so pure, so perfect. And every time you listen to it, I feel like you live in it a little more. Like you move another piece of furniture into it.
Yes, I totally agree. There are some albums we listen to that jump out and arrest you like right off the bat. No problem. And then there are some that grow on you, and some that even when you like them at first glance, they just continue to kind of like season and get better. This is one of those. This is one of them cast iron skillet type albums where it's like it's cooking, but it's only going to get more and more seasoned every single time I use it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to use the furniture analogy, you want to use the cast iron skillet analogy, it's all perfectly legal. I think one of the most interesting aspects for me coming off this, we're talking about like the grace given to you by your fan base and your listeners and the listening public, the grace that you get to potentially make some crap. And like, well, we'll go along with you if you kind of stumbled here. I also think that a wild departure from your acclaimed sound is kind of a potentially dicey swing that I think paid off in this instance, because Psychopomp and Soft Sounds from Another Planet were the two albums before Jubilee. And Japanese Breakfast was Michelle Zauner starting this primarily as an engine to deal with her grief from taking care of her sick mom and then her mom's passing. A lot of anxiety and grief there, and using music as a way to process it. As a result, the first two albums you get they're doing some like interesting borderline zany musical things here and there, but overall are pretty like stoic and pretty heavy and pretty full of grief, to then get literally Jubilee, where it just like is a total break with that convention. And it's synthy and it's glistening and it's upbeat. I specifically think of Be Sweet, just like the hook, be sweet to me, baby. Just the
We'll
hook
listen
on
to that today.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Slide Tackle's a great song off there. Jubilee is an album that since we covered it, I've gone back to regularly. It's got a lot of staying power. It was very well received. Grammy nominated. Got Japanese Breakfast nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist. So, I mean, like, Jubilee came in and I think people kind of took notice. So to follow that up with something that is decidedly not more of the same. It's more of the same Japanese Breakfast in the sense that this was the starting precedent, but anyone that came in from Jubilee and wanted more of that will look at this and go, what the fuck? And for me personally, it totally works. It's a return to kind of the more of an exploration of grief, specifically because of Jubilee. There's all that runaway success, and then there's imposter syndrome and pressure, and she's writing about all of that here, and it gives us some really phenomenal, really, especially in comparison with like the pure indie pop of Jubilee, it gives us stuff that's really kind of stripped back. And in many ways, the songs are almost like motifs more than they are actual songs. And they grow and they expand and they change and they kind of meander with a little structure behind them. But the songs kind of work themselves out as opposed to being these like finely hammered, rehearsed, presented entities. These songs kind of feel like they're figuring themselves out along the way. Just a hippy dippy way to put it, I guess, but it's the sense that I got. Again, conversational, discovery, private and public. We get all of that on this album, but it doesn't get super bogged down by the grief. It finds very interesting ways to deliver it musically. So I think coming off of Jubilee, this might plop for some people being like, but I want more of that. And
so
this, you know?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I guess if you don't like it, you don't like it. There's not much I'm going to tell you to change your mind about it. But I think if you like indie music, I think you're going to like this album. I think it would be tough for it is a departure from Jubilee, but I don't think it's so much of one that if you're already into indie music, there's not a departure from indie music. So I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to have a big problem with it. Now, if Jubilee is the only version of indie music that somebody likes, then they're probably not going to like this. But probably not very many people that's the case for. So I think we're pretty safe to say this is going to be pretty, well received. I do think one thing I noticed, like right off the bat, was the first listen I did was just on a regular, like the Bose, like SoundLink, like kind of small speaker. It's like got a good range of sound. It's pretty loud, but it's not like a super wide range dynamic like a full stereo setup's going to be, or like a good pair of headphones is going to be. So my first listen on headphones was my second one. And so I liked the album the first time through, but when I heard it on headphones and got a much more full spectrum sound, I was very impressed with the production level of this album. And then when I listened to it on my like actual stereo setup and got, and I think that for me is where I really hear the album the way it's meant to be heard by me, I suppose, is like through those speakers. It was even better because it was like heavy on the bass, which I really like. It provided a thump on a lot of songs that I think needed it. And then I think without it, you would have felt like they were just much too lightweight. Some of the songs on Jubilee, I think, could be looked at that way. But they, again, had good production on that album too. But I think that's where, while there's not a ton going on at any given time, especially on a few of these songs, like especially right off the bat on Here Is Someone, like there's not a ton of instruments happening and there's not a huge complicated lyrical quest we're going on. So like there's got to be, everything that's there has to be solid. And it's the bass lines, I think, are very inventive. And I think she's the one that comes up with basically all of it herself, right?
Yeah, she's the primary songwriting
Yeah.
engine behind
So
this.
to me, it's because you see that a lot where somebody's the primary and it's like, okay, they play all the instruments, but the lyrics are great, maybe the guitar is great, and everything else is pretty boring because they know how to play those instruments, but they're not like great at those instruments. I feel like she is very good at finding a way, even on an instrument that maybe isn't her primary instrument, so to speak, finding a way to make that part of it interesting. The bass lines on this album were excellent. Like every single song, if you pick out the bass line, it's different, it's dynamic every time. It's one of those things where you listen to the Beatles and you think everything sounds the same, and it's like if you start listening for the bass lines, that's where you're going to hear like the real magic of it. And as bad as that Ringo Starr album was that we did, like his drumming in the Beatles is a lot better than people give him credit for. And that's a lot of what makes those songs really go, is that rhythm section. I think she pays a lot of attention to that on this album. And I think it's for the benefit overall of every single song on here, because I think there's always got to be, for me, for like really good indie music, it's always got to have some sort of groove or like danceability to it. I'm going to get pretty bored with it otherwise pretty fast, because a lot of times the lyrics aren't going to mean anything to you, as like they're very obscure a lot of times. So unless it has like something else that's hooking you into it, it's very easy to move on from those things very quickly. She's very good at getting you into it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, not to like dunk on someone we're not going to cover necessarily, but like the new Lucy Dacus, I checked it out and I'm like, you know,
See,
I
that's a big reason why I like wasn't a huge fan of like the Lucy Dacus, the Julian Baker.
yeah.
Like there's a reason I wasn't a huge fan of those things.
See, and I see that because I see exactly what you're talking about, where for me, like the indie pop, indie folk, however you want to categorize it, you just want to straight up say indie. It's not necessarily like, if I don't like get grooving, I don't get dancing at a certain point, I'm gonna get bored. I'm gonna get bored if you can't find, if you don't have anything to say and you don't have an interesting way to say it. However you're gonna execute it, it just has to hold my attention. And it sounds like cruel to be like, oh, someone like Lucy Dacus or the big bad Julianne Baker. And I don't have this criticism about Phoebe Bridgers, and they're all buds, but it's like someone that's pouring so much of themselves and their emotions into their writing. It's just I've never been able to fully appreciate those sentiments because
Mhm.
musically it's more like trying to get myself into poetry than it is listening to music, and I came to listen to
Yes.
music. So
Yes.
I'm never going to sit and be like it's bad, but it doesn't move the needle for me the way that Japanese Breakfast does. Like
Mhm.
we'll stay in this context, like this album. Um and I totally agree everything you said about like the bass, and there's kind of the production feels like it leveled up, and it was Japanese Breakfast's first time in a professional recording studio,
Mhm.
working with Blake Mills out of Sound City Studios. Blake Mills, appropriately enough, has worked with the likes of Fiona Apple, Perfume Genius. I still haven't listened to
Mhm.
that new album. Feist, Jack Johnson, Laura Marling, Marcus Mumford, Wise Blood, on and on and on. Like all the
Probably like a good chunk of the Dead Oceans Records roster because she's on that.
Yep. This
I
is a
mean,
Dead
that's
Oceans
where
release. Yep.
that's Strand of Oaks is on that. I mean, there's like that's Indie Paradise is Dead Oceans label right now.
Absolutely. And like
Yeah.
again, Phoebe Bridgers, total juggernaut. So there's you got a lot of latitude for what you want to do with your sound within indie. And I think getting into a professional studio setting for the first time and working with a seasoned producer like Blake Mills, to create this album, it left a lot of the quirks that were in there from the other releases, but it added an element with production and mixing and mastering that made it feel bigger, made it feel more full. Like when I did my headphones listen, it just felt so rich and so like three-dimensional,
Mhm.
which was awesome. Um, and I also think like it with particular deference to like the rhythm section, the bass lines, the drums, because Michelle Zauner is the one writing all of this stuff. Sometimes people don't necessarily have a concept for like, well, this is I don't play bass, therefore I don't really have a sense of like a
Mhm.
cool bass thing I can do here. And that shows. And you don't get that here. I think whether it's a combination of she knows what she wants every single thing to sound like, or she's getting really good advice and really good input.
Mhm.
There were some like distinctly interesting choices all over this one. In particular, a song that I really enjoyed was Mega Circuit. And I know
Mhm.
this means nothing to you, but to anyone out there who's listening who might be able to agree with this, tell me if you close your eyes that this could not be an Elvis Costello song circa Spike, like 1990 Elvis Costello.
See, this was giving me 90s. So
Yep.
I don't know about that. I don't know about the whole Elvis Costello part of
Oh,
things.
you're gonna
I
learn.
really wish he hadn't brought that up. That was really just we were having a good time. Everything was going really
Now
well.
we're
Then he
having a
just had to
better
bring him up.
time.
Yeah, no, we're having a bad time. One of us is having a we it tipped the scale. We were both having a good time. Okay, now you're having a great time, and it took away. To there. It's a zero sum game.
I got to get mine.
Okay. Yeah, it's clearly we see who the team player is on the podcast and who is not, and we'll leave it up to the viewers to decide. You can let us know in the comments what you think.
Hey, to quote Elvis Costello off that same album, Spike, you're
Oh,
nobody till
just put the
everybody in
shovel
this world
down.
thinks you're
Just
a
put the
bastard.
shovel down, Alex.
It,
Just
it,
put the. You're gonna get blisters.
it's a relevant quotation, Jeff, that supports your
You
thesis.
can't keep carrying water for this guy.
You know
Okay,
what I say?
he's very low to the ground. He's going to be better at carrying water than you. He's got a lower center of gravity. Let him handle it.
I can't, as Elvis Costello would say, let him dangle, let him dangle. You keep setting me up for references from Spike, Jeff.
I wish I really, really wish I wasn't.
Gotta stop.
I really wish I wasn't. But that one gave me very like 90s. I almost felt like it was like a Richard Linklater movie. Like it would be in that.
That's
You know what
good.
I mean? And it's when I first heard it, so I'm going to read some of the lyrics here. Barreling around the mega circuit, kicking mud off ATVs, plotting blood with your incel eunuchs. I could be the home you need. Like just the blood with first of all, the ATV thing, I was like, what is she singing about ATVs for? Like, what the hell? And then and settled and like plotting blood with your incel eunuchs. Like just that line. It took me a minute to like figure out what was going on with it, but I was like, that just hit so hard. in that song. That was so good.
Oh yeah, when she decides she's gonna puncture an artery, she just goes right
Yeah.
into it, just blah. It was great, and I think also it speaks to some of the strength of the lyrics on this because, like you said, where it's uh, kind of a subsequent listens thing where it grows on you. Your appreciation of like the lyrics might seem a little simplistic in parts at first, but you really do benefit from dialing in, really listening, and then like go through it with the lyrics in your hand at some point. That's something that I do when we listen to these albums. Is like
Hmm.
it's easy for certain people, you might miss a line or something, but it's just it helps reinforce it. And you look at a song like Honey Water. The lure of honey water draws you from my arms so needy. You follow in colonies to sip it from the bank. In rapturous sweet temptation, you wade in past the edge and sink in, insatiable for a nectar, drinking till your heart expires. Pure poetry,
She's a little siren.
a little
Yeah.
siren hummingbird. Pure poetry on its own. You're like, wow, what a line. And then put to music, it just makes it all make sense. Something like that could come across as so pretentious in the wrong hands. And it's so genuine here. And then when put to music, is just so fantastic and so perfect. Honey Water, 100% one of my favorites off the album.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so she will drop because it's like what's in the same song. Where is it here? So she goes from like the first verse, why can't you be faithful? Why won't you believe? They say only love can change a man, but all that changes is me. Like very simple, very quick, but very, very meaningful. And then in the same song, the chorus like does is what you were reading, ending with the insatiable for a nectar drinking till your heart expires. So we go from this like very clever, very indie sort of verse, and then we go into some straight like meatloaf poetry. I mean, just in the same song, and I think that goes back to what I was saying that she is a songwriter. I think there is always an effort. It's not just that there's one thought she needed to get out, and she's like, I got to just get this out on this song. And I think that's where you end up with a lot of those songs, artists that we were, I don't know how heavily we were criticizing. We were just kind of saying where it doesn't really speak to us, where it's just guitar, stream of consciousness, but there's not doesn't really go anywhere. There's nothing like backing up to it. There's no like big hook or anything like that. So I think that's where this is really separated. Is you get all of that songwriting ability, all of that poetic ability, but you get it matched up with some really exciting musical structures. You get a song, you start out with the with Here Is Someone, and I'm terrible today remembering what any of the names of these songs are, like where they are on this. I keep having to go back to the list. But you start out with like Here Is Someone, and then Orlando in Love, which is just a straight up indie pop song. And as you move through this album, you realize that she just is capable of whatever type of music. I don't know how good of a metal album she would make, but I'd be happy to see her try. But it's like I feel like anywhere within this realm, she can do any of it. And I think as long as she feels like she's got something to say, and it's weird that all of it is so personal. Like you can tell it's like very specific and very personal to her life, but the way she writes it allows it to also be relatable. You don't feel separated from it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the very conscious decision. Like so much of what came on the albums before was like legitimately autobiographical. And now this is given way more to storytelling based on a feeling, based on experiences, based on concepts, as opposed to like really getting down and dirty into her own
Hmm.
past or her own situation. So yeah, very relatable, coming from a very personal place, kind of have your cake and eat it too. Um, and then just taking some really subtle but interesting musical swings on this, where I was ready. I there was where I thought I saw it going, which was this is all really nice. This is all really well put together. It's kind of gonna probably wind up all riding one dynamic. Because the first two songs, I'm like, they're great. They've got a lot of
Hmm.
passion behind them, but they do kind of feel like they're riding the same wavelength. And then you get into Honey Water, and it just ends up turning into like a Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds
Hmm.
song. and just becomes this like gigantic like arena rock level. It just gets bigger and bigger and more dramatic and more expansive. Um, and so like, okay, well, you just opened up the size and depth of that song, and that was like all you had to do. You didn't have to go crazy with instrumentation or being like overly complicated. In fact, kind of like curbing the sound a little bit in terms of where Japanese Breakfast was on Jubilee,
Mhm.
kind of taking a step back. Like there's still like synth elements and stuff in this and like very like tasteful tactical points, but Jubilee was kind of like all about that, just like
Mhm.
vomiting pop all over the place. And here kind of harkens back to like a sound from like the 2010s, like an indie folk or orchestral kind of somber gothic chamber choir type
Mhm.
aesthetic, very much in the same vein as some Mitski.
And you
And
were saying this was the producer that worked with Feist? You're saying there
yeah,
was very orchestral and kind of choral elements?
yeah, funny how that
Huh.
happens.
Huh.
Huh, huh.
Huh.
Yeah, and I just think like there were a lot of different sounds evoked within this without them all. It was done very subtly, so it didn't
Mhm.
feel like 9 different genres crammed on one thing. There was a unity of sound, enough to make them stand out and feel different. You sprinkle the cosmic country pixie dust on Men in Bars and add a great unexpected feature, and it
Mhm.
transforms the song entirely. She could have done that on her own. She didn't necessarily need to bring a feature in there. Makes it 10 times better, obviously, but
Mhm.
it's these little subtle deployments of different elements without having to go over the top or put a hat on a hat or get too fancy. In many cases, it was the art of subtraction, addition by
Mhm.
subtraction, that really worked, and pulling back and scaling back. That in the end, because of how short this album is, like 10 songs, 35 minutes, it was allowed to like make up for that and feel expansive
Mhm.
for the sheer like depth and breadth of what was being done musically. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of interesting shit like track to track on this one.
Yeah, I really there's a couple songs that I think deserve for me special shout out. So I mentioned it a couple times already, but the opening track here is someone I think is a great introduction into this album. I think it gives you a great idea that your production levels are going to be a little bit higher than what you've seen from her before. That the lyrics are going to be personal but still relatable. I think You Go Honey Water was fantastic as well. Those lyrics slapped. Getting down to like towards the end, but Picture Window was a phenomenal song in my
Fuck yeah.
the
Yep.
ending, the ending chorus, like the way that goes where it says all of my ghosts are real, all of my ghosts are my home, and it just kind of repeats that. Just it's very like ethereal. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes, and it's just like that just felt special. Like that gave me the tingles, that song. So that part was fantastic. We've already mentioned Men in Bars being like, I mentioned that it's probably my favorite song on the album. I don't know if you're putting it at that level, but fantastic. And then I really like the closing track, Magic Mountain. I thought was excellent as well. There really weren't any true weak spots on the album. Those were just the spots where I felt like it went too special for me.
I that's like the perfect distinction to make. There were no weak spots, there were no dips. It was, I guess anything looks like a dip in comparison to something that you liked better, but
Yeah.
for me, like there's like if this is like the like basement for quality, it
Hmm.
never even got close to touching the floor.
Yeah.
Um Again, doing very different things track to track without them all sounding like jumbled. They're all coming out of the same place. I had pretty much all the same songs under my notable track
Hmm.
section. Um, I liked Orlando in Love, I think, aesthetically, but musically it was not as complete or as interesting as
I
Mega
felt like
Circuit.
that was the most boring song on there.
If you
It
want to,
felt the most forced, I think.
especially as coming in as the second song on the album
Hmm.
after you've like got all this goodwill off the first track,
Yeah.
to then get into Orlando in Love, I'm like, that was when I got the idea. I'm like, oh, I can't ride this aesthetic and this
But I think
dynamic
that
this whole
is
time.
kind of become the lead single
It is.
of the album. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, whatever, it is what it
Yeah.
is. People loved The Last Dinner Party, Nothing Matters, and I'm like, that was not even close to my most favorite song on
Hmm.
that album. Um, but at any rate, I appreciate like the kind of Barry Lyndon Renaissance candlelight aesthetic to it.
Hmm.
Mega Circuit, great. Again, it evokes that like 90s Elvis Costello, but like because you don't like him, you can get on board with this. It's a song about toxic masculinity, and there is no one more of a toxic masculine than Elvis Costello by his own admission. I read his book. It is thicker than the phone book, and he is up his own ass in that book.
Oh,
And
you
he
don't say.
admits it. And he admits it. He's
Yeah,
like,
you don't say.
"Oh, what can I say?" And I'm like, "Well, stop doing it then." But gives us great music. But it's
Well,
you gotta listen to
don't. I'm
Spike.
not going to let that slide.
You gotta
Yeah.
listen to Spike. It's if any Costello is gonna get you, for some reason, I think it's Spike. Someone might sit there and go, "Why are you starting someone off on Spike?" And if you don't know Elvis
Well, I think
Costello,
we
you go,
did.
"What are you doing?"
We did a Costello album.
We did Trust, and as I recall,
Yeah.
you tried to be fair to it, but you really didn't like it.
I really did not.
Well, you know what? It's a work in progress, Jeff. Everything's a work in progress.
Yeah.
But Mega Circuit, I think, in all seriousness, as a Costello fan,
Yeah.
it worked in that same mode of like the self critique. Like he would be critiquing his own like cowardice as a shitty toxic man. She's critiquing that outside of herself.
Mhm.
Honey Water, fantastic. Men in Bars, 100% my favorite. I would call this song, and maybe someone would be like, "You're out of your mind." I would call it a masterpiece because I think there's a difference
Mhm.
between something that's perfect and something that's a masterpiece. I
Mhm.
think perfect is like in the technical execution, you nailed it, and there's really nothing you can pick apart. But a masterpiece is something that like the whole of your above the neck artistry went into,
Mhm.
and all your feeling, and I think for something like this, the performances on it, the fact that it is simple, the lyrics are simple, it's simple structurally, but it's like wonderful. You pick apart Jeff Bridges vocal line
Mhm.
on the chorus, and it is so weird, it hops all over the place. It's just like he's all over the place. It's very strange, and it
Mhm.
totally works when they're joined together. So it's I Men in Bars is a masterpiece, especially on this album. Um, I think Picture Window was another standout. Just like that melancholy hook at the end of it
Mhm.
is
That's what
phenomenal.
did it, because the song up to that point, the first time I heard it, that song, I was not like that. It was good, but I was like not crazy about it. And then that ending chorus hit, and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
And then next time I listened to it, because I knew that was coming at the end, like I had all the anticipation in the world. It's like a Coheed song.
Yep.
It's like, okay, this first part's going to be kind of slow, but when we get to like 6.5 minutes, this baby's going to get cooking.
Oh,
Yeah.
and this baby got cooking. I would say to be the first guy to step into the batting cage here, for me, this is a buy it.
Mhm.
I think that whether or not you're a fan of Japanese breakfast, or like if you are a fan, what level of fan are you? Like how deep in are you a ride or die day one? Are you just getting into it? Did you come on to the party with Jubilee? If you're a fan of Japanese breakfast, obviously this is phenomenal and it's essential. If you are like me, curious about the ways that people are really experimenting with pop and utilizing pop and doing different things, because when you grow up with this weird binary that pop is Britney Spears, pop is the Backstreet Boys, pop is Christina Aguilera. And it kind of takes some time to shake that off. And like, something today like the Beatles, which feels like they exist in their own subgenre or their own like subcategory of like legends, legacy music. They were pop. Pop is evolving, it's changing. It's always doing something different. And right now, I think there's a lot of people that are going, pop got stale. Pop went mainstream for way too long. It got stale. How do we take it back and do something interesting with it and kind of rehabilitate the genre? because a lot of people be like, "Oh, it's pop, it's poppy bullshit," and it's like,
Mhm.
to quote a guy we really don't like that much, Eric Clapton, Clapdog, it's in the way that you use it. And if you want to see someone who's using pop and using indie and putting a lot of emotional mileage and a lot of artistry behind it, look no further than Japanese Breakfast. I give this one a buy it.
I will absolutely agree with you. I think this one's a buy it. I think if you're already an indie fan, you probably will buy it anyway. But I think it's a great example of staying familiar enough within a genre, but trying to do some other things too. I think what I would love to see is this album gave me very like Deeper Well vibes from Casey Musgraves, where it's like not musically not all that similar or anything, but as far as like kind of what they were trying to do and kind of how far they were able to push the envelope within like what what they've been used to doing. I was very positive on the Deeper Well album. I'm very positive on this album. I think it's really nice to see artists stay true to themselves. Now, it may not be exactly what you were hoping they were going to do or what because I would love for Casey Musgraves just to come out with another like honky tonky country album. I don't think she's ever going to do that again. Who knows? But, I think when you can appreciate a really good songwriter for whatever it is that they're producing, I think that's where you truly see where the talent lies. And I think that's why it shows that she is kind of looked at in that upper echelon of indie artists. If you were to put together like an indie festival, she'd be, I don't know if she'd be like an absolute headliner, but she'd be one of those bigger names up towards the top. She'd be playing later in the day for sure on one of the bigger stages. So, I think there's a lot of places she can go after this album. I think if she kept doing more of the same on this album, I'd buy the next album that sounds like this too, because it's just well produced. It's well written. I think there's a lot for people to draw from in this album. Whatever emotion it is that you're looking for, you'll find a little bit of kind of everything in here. If you like the old school kind of country songs, if you like the movie Crazy Heart, just go listen to that song she did with Jeff Bridges. Like, go listen to Men in Bars, like just because it's should have been in that movie. It's really a fantastic experience from like top to bottom. So this one's going to get a pretty enthusiastic buy it from me as well.
Shook them up. It's a double buy it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And I had a thought too while you were talking about that, when you mentioned Deeper Well and like, oh, I'd like for Casey Musgraves to like go back to the old stuff. I would love to see an exchange program between Casey Musgraves and Poopa Doopa. If you got Dua Lipa with her voice to do like a cosmic country album, and you do enough of a step down dose where it's like, we're going to keep enough pop in here for you, Poopa Doopa, but we're really going to lean you hard into cosmic country. And then we're going to let Casey Musgraves do like a pop electronica kind of thing. Because I think specifically of their voices with a very like slight voice that Casey Musgraves has. Like when she's doing Dusky on like singer-songwriter, just the acoustic guitar is one thing, but most of all with like the poppy stuff, you could get away with like a Charlie XCX type range.
Well, I mean, just look at High Horse. I mean, that's a perfect example.
Yes. Let's suck the last of the country out of High Horse and wing that kind of stuff at Casey Musgraves. Let's get Poopa Doopa a pink cowboy hat, a set of Stingray boots, some line dancing lessons, and get her on down there and get her making herself a cosmical country album. I would surely love to see that. I don't know why I felt compared to share. Like, why did I need to tell you that? Why does anyone need to hear that?
Because you put it out in the universe, and sometimes they happen.
I like this idea of exchange programs between artists where they get together and they're like, let's trade.
Let's trade producers,
Yeah. Yes. Trade spouses even, maybe?
Well, it's not the 70s anymore, Alex.
Hey, man, you turn that pineapple upside down. You know what happened.
Marla's been listening to a lot of Silver Springs lately. Should I be worried?
Really? I don't know. It's like that guy in the comments on the Jason Isbell video is like, my wife's been listening to Foxes in the Snow an awful lot. Should I be worried? I just want to be like, oh.
I think the time for worrying was about last year, buddy.
Yeah, it was one album cycle ago, my friend. You got to make moves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
You got
that's
to
tough.
get
Yeah.
yourself, you got to get Manscaped. Use our promo code out on that line.
Yeah.
I
And
wish.
where would people be able to find out about that Jason Isbell album, Alex?
Golly, I mean, so many places where one might look, but excuse me while I pet the dog. He has terrible anxiety.
Is that a
Uh,
euphemism?
I'm over here petting the dog, if y'all know what I'm saying. And ain't nobody helping me do it. There's a lot of places where you could go for music news, music theory, classic Jeff and Alex ribs and dynamics like we're doing right now. Our dogs do make frequent appearances. Tanner is like a dog. He's on the show quite a bit these days. And he is pure bred, baby. You ever feel the heat coming off his haunches? Take a look at his teeth, his gums. He is blue chip. So if you want to see more videos of that with our main dog, Tanner, if you want to see the dogs, the bad dogs of music reviews, if you want to see us off the chain, released from the pound, and off of our heartworm meds, then you have to go to youtube.com/C/out on that line. And folks, you're going to find so many videos there that we've done. So just like the videos, be subscribed, turn notifications on, and leave comments. For the love of God, the comments are the lifeblood of this thing. So Holly, if you hear me, who let the dogs out? Good question. Find out. youtube.com/C/out on that line.
That was by far my favorite one of all time. We forget to take our heartworm medicine.
We're off the flea dip, baby.
Oh, that was just fantastic. Folks, make sure you comment down below. Tell us how good that was, because I already know. Until next time.